37 seconds. That's how long Neil Armstrong had left before Mission Control would have called an abort. 37 seconds away from the most embarrassing failure in American history. Or, if you believe what millions of people still believe today, 37 seconds away from the world's greatest lie being exposed live on television. So which one is it? Did humanity actually land on the moon? Or did the most powerful country on Earth pull off the most elaborate hoax ever staged? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't have a single doubt left, one way or the other. Hey, I'm FactSpark, and if you're new here, hit subscribe right now, because this is exactly the kind of video we make. Let's get into it. On September 2nd, 1962, President John F. Kennedy stood before a crowd of thousands at Rice University in Texas and made a promise to the entire world. America would go to the moon, not because it was easy, but precisely because it was hard. As U.S. government poured what would be the equivalent of over $150 billion in today's money into a single project, Neil Armstrong stepped off a ladder and placed his boot on the lunar surface. It was July 21st, 1969. Over 600 million people watched it live on television, the most watched broadcast in all of human history. 600 million people. Think about that for a second. That was roughly 1 in every 6 humans alive on the planet at the time. And yet, and here's where it gets interesting, a huge portion of the population today genuinely believes none of it happened, that it was all filmed in a Hollywood studio, that the footage was faked, that astronauts never left Earth orbit.
So let's actually examine that claim with the respect it deserves, which means looking at the real evidence, the real physics, and the real arguments, and dismantling them one by one. Before we go any further, I genuinely want to know your answer to this. Before watching this video, did you believe the moon landing was real or faked? Drop it in the comments right now. No judgment. I'm seriously curious about the split, and it'll be interesting to see where everyone lands. Pun absolutely intended. The conspiracy theory as we know it today was really ignited by one book. His central argument was simple and devastatingly effective. NASA's own internal estimates gave the mission a probability of success of just 0.0017%. And yet it succeeded on the very first attempt, on schedule, without a single major public failure. Doesn't that seem suspicious to you? It does, and that's exactly why this theory spread so rapidly, because it doesn't sound crazy. It sounds like a reasonable question from a reasonable person. So let's go through the most popular pieces of evidence the conspiracy theorists use, and let's actually test them against the laws of physics. Argument number 1. Where are the stars? This is the single most repeated argument in the entire conspiracy theory universe. Look at any photograph taken on the lunar surface during the Apollo missions. The sky is completely black. No stars. If the moon has no atmosphere, if there's nothing filtering the sky the way Earth's air does, then you should be able to see thousands of stars even during the day. So why is the sky completely empty? Proof of a studio, they say. Proof that the backdrop is fake. Except, and this is so simple it almost hurts, this is just how cameras work. Any photographer will tell you immediately what's happening. A camera has an exposure setting. When you're taking pictures in a bright environment, and the lunar surface in direct sunlight is extraordinarily bright, reflecting sunlight off white dust with zero atmosphere to diffuse it, you set the exposure short. You close down the aperture. You let less light in, so that the main subjects, the astronauts, the lunar module, the surface itself, are properly exposed and not washed out in white. The result? Any light source thousands of times dimmer than the surface, like distant stars, simply doesn't register on the film in that exposure window. This is not a conspiracy. It's the same reason you can't photograph a star while standing in front of a floodlight. You can test this yourself right now with your phone. Go outside at night. Point your camera at a bright streetlight and notice how many stars vanish from the shot. Same principle. Stars would only appear in lunar photos if the exposure were set to something like 20 seconds, which would completely blow out every other element in the frame. Argument number 2, the mysterious spots in the sky. Some conspiracy enthusiasts point to strange bright patches and flares visible in certain Apollo photographs, floating shapes in the lunar sky that look to them like evidence of studio lighting rigs, light leaks, or something being hidden. Sounds compelling until you learn that this is one of the most well-documented optical phenomena in photography. It's called lens flare. When a bright light source, like say the unfiltered sun in an airless environment, hits a camera lens at the right angle, it bounces around inside the optical elements and creates artifacts. Rings, polygons, streaks of light.
It appears in every camera ever made. You've seen it in movies, deliberately, because directors think it looks cool. There is nothing mysterious here. Argument number 3. The shadows are wrong. Here's one that sounds genuinely scientific. In several Apollo photographs, shadows cast by different objects don't appear perfectly parallel to each other. If there's only one light source, the sun, shouldn't all shadows be exactly parallel? The fact that they aren't, the theorists argue, proves there were multiple studio lights, multiple sources, a fake set. There are actually 2 very straightforward explanations for this, and neither requires a Hollywood studio. The first is perspective. When you photograph a 3-dimensional scene with a flat camera, parallel lines converge toward a vanishing point. This is basic perspective geometry, the same reason train tracks appear to meet at the horizon, even though they don't. Parallel shadows photographed from an angle will appear to converge or diverge. The second explanation is terrain. The lunar surface is not a flat studio floor. It's covered in craters, ridges, slopes, and depressions. A shadow cast on an angled surface will point in a different direction than a shadow cast on flat ground, even with identical lighting. This was actually tested and demonstrated on the show Mythbusters, which replicated the exact shadow patterns using a single outdoor light source and uneven terrain. Confirmed. Argument number 4. The flag is waving. Now we're getting to the famous one, the clip that launched a million forum threads. You can see it in the original footage. Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong plant the American flag in the lunar soil, and as they handle it, it visibly waves and ripples. But wait, there's no air on the moon. No atmosphere means no wind. So how can a flag wave? The answer, they say, is obvious, because it was filmed on Earth, where air exists. Except, look at the footage more carefully and pay attention to what actually happens. The flag moves when the astronauts are physically touching it, handling it, twisting the pole into the ground. The moment they let go, what does it do? It doesn't keep waving. It doesn't billow and ripple like a flag in a breeze. It oscillates back and forth, and this is the key. It oscillates without slowing down. It keeps going. Because on Earth, air resistance would dampen that oscillation within seconds. In a vacuum, Newton's first law is absolute. An object in motion stays in motion. There is nothing to stop the flag from continuing to swing once it's been set in motion. That's not evidence of wind. That's evidence of a vacuum. The flag was also specifically engineered for this mission. It had a horizontal rod along the top edge to make it appear extended rather than hanging limp. NASA knew perfectly well that a standard flag in a vacuum would just droop down the pole. Are you still watching? Good, because we're about to get to the arguments that even smart people find genuinely hard to dismiss. Argument number 5. The footage was slowed down. This one requires a bit more thought. The theory goes like this. The strange, bouncy, slow-motion way the astronauts move in the footage isn't because of low gravity. It's because the footage was filmed at normal speed on Earth and then played back at half speed, giving the illusion of reduced gravity. Simple, cheap Hollywood trick. Except the physics doesn't cooperate. Slowing down a video does indeed make movements look more gradual, but gravity acts differently on different axes of motion. If you slow down a video of a person jumping, their vertical movement slows down, but so does everything else, including the way their arms swing, the way their suit moves, the way dust settles. The proportional relationships between all these movements remain the same. But reduced gravity doesn't just slow everything down uniformly, it specifically changes the relationship between vertical and horizontal motion.
the arc of a jump is different. The way dust, kicked up from the surface, travels in a perfect ballistic parabola with no air resistance to scatter it. That arc cannot be replicated by slowing down footage shot in Earth gravity. Mythbusters tested this too, using harness rigs to simulate 1/6 gravity. And even with sophisticated equipment, the resulting movement was detectably different from what appears in the Apollo footage. There is no video trick that can replicate the physics of a genuinely reduced gravitational environment. Argument number 6, the leaked studio footage. This one periodically resurfaces and manages to fool people every single time it comes back around. The claim is that there exists footage, secretly recorded and leaked online, showing the Apollo astronauts in a film studio rehearsing the moon landing. In one version of the clip, you can even see one of the astronauts stumble. The problem is that the origin of this footage is completely documented. It was produced by a company called Viral Factor, which creates fabricated viral content as a marketing and media strategy. They make fake leaked footage professionally. The company itself has acknowledged the video is fiction and has never claimed otherwise.
There's also the famous mock documentary called Dark Side of the Moon, a French film that claims through fake interviews, including with a fake Henry Kissinger, that Stanley Kubrick directed the faked moon landing footage as a favor to Nixon's government. The film's director, William Carroll, has stated repeatedly and publicly that the entire film is a work of satirical fiction, designed specifically to demonstrate how easily people can be manipulated by authoritative-looking documentary formats. Both pieces of evidence were created as jokes, and both are now sincerely shared as proof by millions of people online. Argument number 7. Why can't we see it through telescopes? If the landing sites are still up there, the equipment, the lunar rovers, the flags, the descent stages of the lunar modules, why can't any telescope on Earth or in orbit simply point at the moon and show us the hardware? If it's there, we should be able to see it, right? This one is a matter of pure mathematics. The largest optical telescope ever flown in space is the Hubble Space Telescope, a piece of engineering that cost billions of dollars and represents the absolute peak of human optical technology. The angular resolution of Hubble, the smallest angular size it can distinguish, is approximately 0.05 arcseconds. Now, the lunar module descent stage is roughly 4 meters wide. At the distance of the moon, roughly 384,000 kilometers, that 4-meter object subtends an angle of approximately 0.002 arcseconds. That's roughly 25 times smaller than what Hubble can resolve. You would need a telescope mirror roughly 25 times wider than Hubble's just to begin to see a fuzzy pixel where the landing hardware sits. The object is simply too small and too far away for any existing instrument to image directly. Argument number 8. The Van Allen radiation belts. Now, this is the argument that physicists take most seriously because it's at least based on real science. The Van Allen belts are zones of intense radiation, protons and electrons trapped by Earth's magnetic field, that surround our planet at altitudes ranging from roughly 1,000 to 60,000 kilometers above the surface. Any spacecraft traveling from Earth to the moon must pass through these belts. The radiation inside them is genuinely deadly at sufficient doses. So the question is legitimate. How did the astronauts survive? The answer is in the details of exposure time and radiation intensity. The Apollo spacecraft did not linger in the Van Allen belts. The trajectory was calculated specifically to minimize time spent in the most intense regions. The spacecraft passed through the belts in roughly 30 minutes on the way out and 30 minutes on the way back. At those speeds, the total radiation dose received by each astronaut was measured, both by instruments on board the spacecraft and by dosimeters worn by the crew. The doses came out to between 1 and 2 rem, depending on the mission. To put that in perspective, a dose of around 300 rem delivered over a short period is considered acutely lethal. The astronauts received less than 1% of a lethal dose. The radiation exposure from the Apollo missions was real, it was tracked, it was measured, and it was well within survivable limits. Argument number 9. The technology was too primitive. This one often gets stated with a confident smirk. They went to the moon with less computing power than your smartphone. And it's true. The guidance computer aboard Apollo 11 had roughly 4 kilobytes of RAM and operated at about 0.043 megahertz. Your phone is incomparably more powerful. But the question is not whether the technology was primitive by today's standards. The question is whether it was sufficient for the task it needed to perform. And here, the answer is clearly yes. What the mission required was propulsion capable of escaping Earth's gravity, which had been demonstrated since the late 1950s, basic guidance and navigation using Newtonian mechanics, which are not computationally demanding when the calculations are pre-planned and the computer only needs to execute them, radio communication capable of transmitting audio and video over 384,000 kilometers, which was well within the capabilities of technology that had been continuously developed since the 1930s, and life support systems, which are fundamentally engineering problems, not computing problems. The Apollo guidance computer was specifically designed to do only what was needed, nothing more. Complexity is not a prerequisite for sufficiency. Argument number 10. If we could do it then, why haven't we gone back? This is perhaps the most emotionally resonant argument the conspiracy theorists have. If we really landed on the moon in 1969 with 1960s technology, why has no human being set foot there since December of 1972? More than 50 years have passed. We've had GPS, the space shuttle, the International Space Station, reusable rockets, and nobody has walked on the moon. Doesn't that seem strange? The honest answer is not really, once you understand how the incentives shifted. The Apollo program existed because of geopolitics, not science. It was a race with the Soviet Union, conducted in the most public arena imaginable, driven by national pride and Cold War strategy. Once the race was won, the political will to fund increasingly expensive crewed lunar missions simply evaporated. And in the decades since, robotics has transformed what's possible. An uncrewed rover costs a small fraction of a crewed mission, operates continuously without life support, doesn't risk human lives, and can conduct scientific work just as effectively, often more so. The reason humans haven't returned is the same reason we don't send humans to defuse bombs anymore when we have robots that can do it more safely and cheaply. It's not evidence of impossibility. It's evidence of rational resource allocation. Now, let's talk about what the conspiracy theory requires you to believe. For the moon landing to have been faked, you would need hundreds of thousands of people. NASA engineers, astronauts, ground control operators, contractors, physicists, medical staff, communications technicians, film crew, to have collectively maintained a perfect secret for over 50 years. Not a single deathbed confession. Not a single leaked document that is held up under scrutiny. Not a single whistleblower whose claims have been independently verified. And consider the primary audience for this deception, the Soviet Union. The USSR had every imaginable reason to expose a faked moon landing. They had lost the space race.
They had their own tracking stations, independently monitoring the Apollo mission's radio transmissions from the moment of launch. The Soviets tracked the spacecraft. They received the communications. They confirmed the mission publicly. The country that would have benefited most from proving the landing was fake accepted it as real. Beyond testimony and politics, there was also physical evidence. Approximately 380 kilograms of moon rocks were brought back to Earth by the Apollo missions. These samples have been studied by geologists and planetary scientists from dozens of countries, including nations with no particular interest in validating American achievement. The isotopic composition of these rocks, their crystalline structure, the complete absence of hydrated minerals, all of it is inconsistent with any rock formation process that occurs on Earth, and consistent with formation in a low-gravity, airless, waterless environment bombarded by cosmic rays for billions of years. Some of these samples were shared with Soviet scientists. They confirmed their authenticity. And then there's the retroreflector. During the Apollo 11 mission, the crew placed a precision array of corner cube reflectors on the lunar surface, a device specifically designed to bounce laser light back to Earth. Every single night, observatories around the world, including in countries with no political stake in validating NASA, fire laser pulses at the exact coordinates where that reflector was placed.
they receive the reflections back. They use the travel time to measure the distance to the moon with millimeter precision. If no human being had ever placed that reflector on the moon, those measurements would not be possible.
Astronomers in France, in Japan, in Germany, in Italy, all of them have confirmed this works because the reflector is there, exactly where Armstrong and Aldrin put it. The moon landing happened. It happened because thousands of brilliant, dedicated human beings worked for years to solve every engineering problem that stood between them and the lunar surface. It happened because a society decided, collectively, that there was something worth reaching for beyond the horizon. It happened because the laws of physics as we understand them permitted it, and the evidence, physical and documentary and scientific, confirms it. The next time someone tells you it was all faked in a studio by Stanley Kubrick, ask them one simple question. Which is harder to believe? That humanity accomplished the most extraordinary engineering achievement of the 20th century? Or that hundreds of thousands of people across decades and across geopolitical lines maintained a perfect, unbroken, undocumented conspiracy without a single credible leak? I know where I stand. And now, hopefully, so do you. If you haven't already, drop your answer in the comments. Did you come in as a believer or a skeptic? I'm reading every single one. Like this video if it gave you something to think about, share it with someone who still has doubts, and subscribe to FactSpark for more of exactly this. See you in the next one.